Point of view tonight is speaking to the senior country manager for IFC in Ghana, Kelhofer, discussing broadly what they do, the role they play in unlocking our private sector through finance and advisory. I understand you have given Ghana over $3 billion in the past decade. I mean, invested. That's a lot. Can you give me your top 3 most important projects you've done in the past decade in Ghana?
I'm going to go back maybe 15 years.
Okay.
And I was really proud during my first time here to do the original Kwame Nkrumah FPSO. That was over $1 billion to help show that West Africa can develop properly an oil and gas sector. And most of that money was actually commercial money that we mobilized.
Wow.
That IFC came in directly invested. They saw IFC's win. They came in with us and alongside us and leveraging our analysis and due diligence and knowing that we'd be standing beside them to help move these projects forward. The second project that I'm extremely...
Is it still working, by the way, FPSO, Kwame Nkrumah, do you know? I'm not even sure.
I think we're still benefiting from oil and gas.
Yeah, correct.
Is the Meridian Port. Okay. MPS.
Okay.
And that's just not just any container port. That is probably Sub-Saharan Africa's 4th or 5th largest port. That is such a big port in deep water serving and large ship serving that ships transship from Mauritania to Angola to Brazil from this port. But more importantly, what this means is Ghana gets the ships directly from China, directly from the US. And then our neighbors in Nigeria and Cote d'Ivoire, they need to transship. And so Ghana's got a 5-10 day advantage in supply chain logistics and competitiveness, as well as lower costs. And so this is part of that whole, Ghana's got a unique opportunity to be a hub for value addition for the region because of this port infrastructure.
Wow.
And I think the third project is a project that we spent some time on earlier. And I'm biased, having managed Bangladesh, but DTRT.
Oh, wow.
And what people forget sometimes is that this entire textile sector in Bangladesh, which provides over 4 or 5 million direct jobs and 30 million indirect jobs, started with one little Korean company in 1989 with a shipping container and sewing machines and about 200 workers. Okay, so it started at a very small scale international company operating in Bangladesh. And so could DTRT be that for Ghana and West Africa? I don't know. Let's see.
Interesting. Some people talk about cotton and its relationship with the textile sector. I don't know what the cotton belt looks like and whether you think DTRT may do better by expanding northwards, because it seems as if the raw material being closer, if they get a cotton ginnery, I think there was a Tumu cotton ginnery many years ago. Well, my point is, do you see potential for growth as we get closer to the Sahel, or for now, let's just see how this is working for?
No, it's interesting because there are 2 strands of thought there.
Yeah.
One is yes, okay, because you do have this cotton, and why send it to the other side of the world to process and make fabric and then send it back? Why not keep it? But actually going from cotton to fabric actually is a bit capital intensive, and takes a lot of work. But there also might be some supply chain, maybe even some branding that could make that viable, okay? But for now, it's more of the traditional model. For instance, Vietnam doesn't have cotton, Bangladesh doesn't have cotton, Cambodia doesn't have cotton. You can still do the textile sector without having your own cotton supply.
Of course, linking it to women picking cotton and the whole value chain, it may make sense in Africa to do this. By the way, these top 3, FPSO Kwame Nkrumah was 15 years ago. Yeah. MPS is maybe 8 to 10 years ago. And then DTRT is also, this is mostly debt, not equity.
Yes.
This is mostly debt. What would it take for you to do equity?
It's a good question, because we're actually IFC keen on doing equity and keen on doing more equity. I mean, our origins are in doing a lot of equity early on. Many years ago, for instance, we had equity in CalBank, okay, and EcoBank. And so we're keen on getting back to that, because that's a lot of the needs here in markets around the world. Equity in particular can help local corporates move up and help local corporates become regional, become international. When people see IFC as an equity investor, then they get greater comfort on collaboration, whether it's market access, whether it's access to finance. And then we're kind of aligned on the same side of the table. What we're actively doing now in support of equity is through funds. Funds like 4DX here in Ghana or Oasis here in
Okay.
Ghana. So we probably have 20 or 30 indirect equity investments here in Ghana
But
via our
through-
funds, through funds that can service smaller scale companies more efficiently than IFC directly.
You mentioned Oasis. I do know they are interested in some agric and agribusiness.
Exactly.
How do you see that sector? Because again, we're talking, agric can be transformative potentially, but for some reason it's not really kicked on. What's the missing link? What do you, I don't know, you've done this for a long time. What should agric think about to really unlock its potential for a country like Ghana?
I may have done this a long time, but I don't consider myself the expert. But what I can share is, people sometimes forget, having spent 4 years in Bangladesh and 8 years in total in Vietnam, they tend to be known for manufacturing. What people forget is they were also very successful in agriculture. Okay, and what Vietnam and Bangladesh have done over the last 34 years is amazing. However, they're running out of capacity. They're running out of workers. They're running out of land. And in the medium term, it just makes sense for this part of the world to be more competitive in agriculture. We have the land, we have the water, we have the sun, we have the people, and we have increasingly even the needed infrastructure. And so we're seeing more opportunities, whether it's large-scale commercial farms, collaborating with various stakeholders here in Ghana, whether it's rice, whether it's tomatoes, whether it's oil palm, or in small-scale stakeholders, small-scale farmers, to help them better link into these supply chains, leveraging fintech, leveraging digital.
I see. So definitely a mix of large-scale commercial farms and also small-scale. Of course, land is a major issue in Ghana. Land tenure is massive, not just for agri, but also for real estate. I do notice you have some interest in real estate as well. Some people say our real estate market, our housing market doesn't make sense to them, right? There's lots of empty high-end, and then there's like a large missing middle. How do you see the real estate market, and what do your investments show you about the potential for real estate to close the housing gap?
In markets around the world, we've been keen on trying to support more and better and more efficient affordable housing. I'm actually very proud that we were a founding equity shareholder in what was originally Ghana Home Loans.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
That helped create, and in parallel, we worked with the government to help create the next necessary regulatory infrastructure for mortgage security to work.
Wow.
Okay, which helped create for middle income the idea of getting a home loan was new 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But we're keen also on moving the needle on further down on affordable housing, on a more affordable housing that's closer to the actual jobs. We've been pretty efficient in this, and maybe in some other markets around the world, and we're very keen on doing more there. For instance, you take the Dawa Industrial Zone, okay, which is a unique opportunity that's going to have a wealth of jobs. Maybe there's a need for increased affordable housing there too, which includes water supply, which includes power.
Interesting. Ghana Home Loans was really a great example of focusing on mortgage and housing. Of course, now the company is being taken over by a normal bank.
But it created the market.
Yeah, but my point is there's such a large need for housing, and there's such a growing middle class that you'd have expected more companies to pursue the Ghana Home Loans model. But they seem to have sort of gone back to traditional bank, who still do a lot of lending to housing, but it doesn't quite feel like that pride of place for housing, particularly the acquiring on the demand side. I think there is money for the supply side for housing, but it looks like the demand side, which is where, so if a young person working in a bank or somewhere else wants to get a house, it's still very expensive to get a loan. If it's dollar denominated, there's FX rates. If it's local, the rates are so high. The fact that you were part of it at the beginning shows the vision. So I'm a bit worried. I'm thinking of your reflection on what has happened. Do you think it was a missed opportunity?
No, actually, I think we have a very interesting opportunity now, because inflation has dramatically declined. Interest rates are now coming down. And so there might be an increased opportunity in the next few years on the local currency front. And this gets back to the pension funds that now have several $1 billion in assets that didn't exist 15 years ago, because they didn't exist 15 years ago, that could potentially be leveraged for some sort of vehicle to mobilize that domestic local currency liquidity for this asset class. We've seen a lot of higher end housing, but we're also seeing them now go increasingly down market. The other area which people sometimes forget though is there's the whole supply cost side of the equation.
Yeah.
And this is where we've been spending a lot of effort, is not just cement, but lower cost cement and lower cost green cement, leveraging not cement from the other side of the world, but our own clays here in Ghana that dramatically reduced the cost for cement that's essential for housing. Same thing for steel, for the B5s of the world, that we can support the steel here in Ghana. Next, obviously, are things like glass and other home finishings. So you can, one is the cost of actual financing, but maybe the supply cost too.
Of course. We've seen some cement companies experiment with locally produced clinker, hoping that it will reduce the dependence on imports.
We're financing that.
Wonderful. This is, I think I forget the name of the company, but they have some. My real question is, there seems to be a lot of cement manufacturing companies, but I'm not sure if there's price competition has led to lower cost. I don't know what your reflection is. There is. So would you say that over the past maybe 5 years, the cost of cement as a component of building has come down?
We're seeing very competitive cement prices, okay? And we're seeing this, the term is calcinated clay. And what they are doing actually is going to increase that competition, okay? And so we're seeing very strong price pressures on
I like the focus on the supply side, because a young man may not be able to buy a house because it's too expensive to build. So if you bring the cost of building material down, whether it's steel or cement, hopefully the company's building will translate some of that into cheaper housing.
Absolutely.
You know, but of course that's not your remit, right? You are just looking to come in and exit. You are not the government. This is the government's job. Your job is to make sure that cement manufacturer has money to put up a cement plant, right?
No, but we still take great pride in helping move the needle and the end product of the cement, whether it's lower cost roads, lower cost manufacturing plants, or lower cost housing. That's
but you track that, and do you track sectors that you support aggressive? So, for example, the port, right? Do you have like a 10-year analysis of what the investment at LMI MPS has done to, say, the cost of imports? I don't know. Is that something you think about in the long term?
We're very proud that traffic, we measured the traffic through the port and traffic through the port to the sub-region that we're very proud of. Okay. That shows Ghana becoming an increasing hub for trade. We're very proud of that. Now what's actually in the containers, whether it's steel or whether it's diapers, but the fact that there are containers of goods and services coming from Ghana and going through the region, we're very proud of that.
Yeah. I've heard you comment around things like the collateral registry and its importance for increasing access to credit for private sector, which means you admit that cost of credit is not just a finance issue, it's also issues around collateral and administrative matters. How heartened are you by some of the efforts within that space to make it easier for smaller companies to get access to credit?
Look, we often say access to finance is a symptom and not the actual cause. And so once you get things like proper credit scoring infrastructure, proper collateral registry for both movable and immovable, efficient court system, or alternative dispute resolution systems, where maybe businesses may not want to go to courts for several years, maybe they can agree ex ante on an arbitration, which has worked in some markets around the world. So things like the collateral registry are game changers on enabling financial institutions, but more importantly, individuals and businesses to leverage things that they otherwise cannot leverage. You know, in many countries in the world, you start a business, you don't go to the bank and get a loan, you get a second mortgage on your house. Okay? And so it's these collateral registries that enable small businesses to maybe leverage things that they otherwise cannot leverage.
You did do something in the cocoa sector. I think it had to do with the buying company. do you do any things in sort of cocoa value addition? All right. The cocoa sector is an interesting one, right? Generally, what has been your approach to that sector?
Well, the big thing that we've been trying to support over the last 18 months, because there's been a bit of a financing gap with that the cocoa board has not moved forward with the transaction, and the LBC supply chain has had to self-finance. And so we've tried to step in, including with some support from the regulators, the central bank and the Ministry of Finance. We've tried to step in to help the LBCs have sufficient liquidity, but local currency liquidity, hence via local banks. And so we're proud to have provided over 100 million and maybe up to 300 million this year to help ensure that whole cocoa supply chain remains viable, and that farmers at the farm gate are seeing all the LBCs and getting as price competitive and the best return possible.
A lot of Ghanaians complain about Ivory Coast seems to do better, not just in cocoa, cashew, a lot of the cash crops. They seem to have a model that they produce more and they seem to have larger companies. What's your reflection on Ghana's potential there? Because whether it's cocoa or cashew or all these products, our Ivorian neighbors seem to do better than we do.
As you know, Bernard, I've worked in a few countries around the world. I've never worked in a country where they're not sometimes envious of their neighbors, thinking their neighbors are doing better. The reality is, from our perspective, we're still seeing a lot of interest here in Ghana. By both folks here on the ground, but from around the world. Just last week, I had one of the largest poultry producers in Brazil here in our offices, looking into the viability of, again, this whole regional opportunity, but being based here in Ghana. We're seeing projects worth hundreds of millions of dollars in things like rice, tomatoes, cassava, being looked into here. Now, there are constraints here, but I think Moti, the 24-hour economy, MEDA, et cetera, are trying to work through and maybe help put some land banks in place to kind of de-risk the land side of things. But we're seeing some very serious plays. Remember, Asia can only produce so much more on the agricultural side. And so when you take a step back and look at the long run, that plate of rice from Vietnam is not going to come down in price over the next 20 years. It's going to go up. So at some point, that price of making that same rice here in Ghana, if not better, is going to be cheaper than importing that rice from Vietnam.
So definitely we have to invest in agriculture, and definitely we have to prepare to be competitive. I'll take a short break. When I come back, we'll focus on the future. We're talking to IFC Senior Country Manager here in Ghana. He also oversights over Liberia, Kelhofer, reflecting on their work over the past few years and looking at the future of development finance here in Ghana. Stay with us.